My relationship with drugs has changed rather dramatically over the last few months, and I want to talk about it because I think it's kind of interesting. To preface this ramble I'm about to go on, my experience with drugs extends to alcohol, weed, mushrooms, and LSD, or acid, or whatever you want to call it. And once I tried a substance, which I won't specify on camera, but it starts with a K, and maybe some people can take a guess at what it is based off that. I digress, though. My use of these substances has never been excessive. I never did anything without thorough preparation and research. My only real experience with any kind of dependence was during the first few weeks after my first breakup with my ex-girlfriend. Long story. But during those first few weeks, I had a lot of trouble falling asleep. And I used weed to help mitigate that. Luckily after those first few weeks, I nipped that in the bud. And I haven't had an issue since. A lot of people who hear me admit something like all this might think less of me. You might think I'm a crazy person for having made these decisions and tried these things. And if you choose to feel that way, that's cool, that's your prerogative. But I know that it doesn't make me a lesser person. And if you want to think that, that's your problem. I guess I'll explain where my interest came from. My interest in substances developed during my gap year, right after I graduated high school. And it stemmed from my interest in like chemistry and pharmacology and stuff. I don't know, kind of a side hobby thing. I just thought that the way these substances can affect your perception of reality, just, based off of what receptor in your brain they antagonize, the way they can affect the human body. I don't know, I just think it's fascinating. I also developed an interest in trying some of the psychedelics I mentioned above because, everything I'd heard about them, every story, everything I'd read sounded insane. And I've always been somebody who has sought new and exhilarating experiences. And it sounded like these things could deliver that. But I digress. I'm not going to say I regret any of these like early psychedelic experiences I had, because they led to major shifts in my perspective on myself. I learned a lot about who I am, and believe it or not, I made huge progress towards being able to love myself, and I genuinely think that I'm better for it. But all that being said, though, as of today, or well, not today, I made this decision weeks ago, actually. All that being said, though, I'm done with everything but alcohol now. I think I'll occasionally smoke weed if a friend has it at a birthday or a special event. Man, not even that. I just don't want to. Man, like, well, my drug usage has never caused any any like adverse effects to my health or my physical well-being. That wasn't why I made this decision. The reason I made this decision is because of the effect that drugs have had on my social life. It's affected it for the worse. One thing that the last year has, specifically the last few months, has really taught me is that, regardless of what I've learned about them and what I know and how safely I am trying to approach usage, like, regardless of any of that, drugs being a part of my life is going to push some people away. For the longest time, I was so focused on the facts and the science and like, well, why not? Because it's I'm okay. It's not bad for me. It's cool. These experiences are fascinating, right? And I don't know. I've just realized that the thing is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that some drugs can be used safely or that some drugs have less of an impact on your body than more socially acceptable drugs like alcohol or nicotine or whatever. Big picture, most people don't see it that way. And that's okay. That's just the way it is. And you can argue with people all you want. But these beliefs are so deeply ingrained, not just in people, but kind of just in our society as a whole. And that's not going to change because of you or me. And maybe that's not a bad thing. I guess my point is that this is not a hill worth dying on. And if you're to the point of arguing with people about this, maybe you need to question why you're that desperate in the first place, Do you really need drugs in your life that badly? I feel like the wonderful people in your life that you risk pushing away are far, far more important than a cool drug experience. It's just not worth it. And the vast majority of drugs you should never touch anyway. If it's a pill, a powder, or a needle, or takes a needle to use, do not try it. Don't. The pool of drugs that are like truly quote unquote safer is a small one. I also just, like I was saying earlier, I just don't want to do them anymore. I've lost the interest I once had for them, and honestly, I want to use my money for more important things nowadays anyway. I want to be able to reach a certain level of wealth by my 30s, and spending money on drugs will just get in the way of that, and it's more important to me. A personal anecdote I have, kind of the story that really forced me to come to this conclusion is that it relates to my ex-girlfriend who I mentioned earlier. My ex was always kind of wary of my drug usage. She didn't want to ever participate herself, and she didn't understand it, and I didn't need her to. For a while I was like, well, why can't these two parts of my life coexist? And again, like I was saying earlier, like, why was it that important to me? Why was a substance that important to me that I needed it to coexist, right? But towards the end of our relationship, it became a point of more contention. And I told her, and I meant it. That like, look, I Our relationship is more important to me than drugs. It's a much larger priority. I'll stop. I was already getting rid of everything that I had at the time. But the thing is that she didn't believe that I truly could stop. You know, she's kind of the mindset that I'm always going to have that desire. But and the last nail in the coffin was when I told her that I had tried this unspecified substance that starts with a K that I mentioned earlier. You know, trying it was kind of an arbitrary decision I made because I had been mildly interested in it and had heard about its therapeutic value. And at the time that I tried it, my ex and I were not together. If we had still been together at that time, I never would have made that out of respect for what she wanted. And I mean that. The thing is that she couldn't shake the image of me doing that from her head. You know, I told her about my experience and how, you know, while somewhat interesting, it was, at least for me, it was kind of honestly lackluster and anticlimactic, and I wasn't and am still not interested in trying it again. You know, and I told her this in an effort to assuage her fears with transparency and honesty, but it caused the opposite to happen, and it pushed away one of the most amazing human beings I've ever had the pleasure of meeting and spending time with. And the sad part is that I know that didn't have to happen, because I know that I'm done. And she just couldn't believe that. And I understand why she can't believe that. You know, she believes in, and this is true for so many people. You know, once you try one thing, well, what's the next thing? You know, that's what she told me. And I told her nothing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't matter if you're genuine or not about quitting. If you really can balance having these experiences with, you know, being a functional human being and going about your life, that doesn't matter, because of the way things are. As soon as some people learn that that's an element of your life, that that's something you're interested in, I would say most people, honestly, they see you as the drug guy or the drug girl, you know? And that's the first thing they're going to see. They're going to see you through that filter, right? And that doesn't make you a bad person. It's just going to change the way they look at you. So don't push away these people that you could be great friends with, that could enrich your life. Don't die on this hill. Sometimes, you know, some drugs can be kind of fun. They can even be safe. But the relationships you have with people and the people in your life are much more important. I'm not here to tell you what to do or how to live your life. Do what you want. What I want is for people to think of the current and even the potential friendships and relationships that could be put at risk I don't know. It's something to consider. Regardless of what you think about it, people's beliefs in these are not going to change. And you shouldn't die fighting for it to change. Yeah. Something to consider.